Hello everyone, welcome to your Geopolitical Updates channel. Today we will start by discussing the news from Venezuela. Last year and earlier this year, Venezuela was striving to demonstrate a more democratic commitment to nations, aiming to improve economic relations with both the United States and the European Union. Even though we may not want to admit it, during the height of the conflict, there was a clear rise in fuel prices. This led the United States and France to resume business with Venezuela. Nicolas Maduro noticed the geopolitical hypocrisy. Maduro commented on the beautiful moment when the flags of the United States and Venezuela fluttered side by side. Even President Macron shook hands with Maduro, despite previously not recognizing Maduro's presidency. He emphasized the importance of re-establishing diplomatic relations with Venezuela. Maduro, in turn, understood this dynamic, and both leaders began to approach each other again. There was a return to oil exploration in Venezuela. This move indicated a trend of rapprochement. In this context, with the growth of BRICS countries and the war in Ukraine, Venezuela gained geopolitical importance for China and Russia. These countries began seeking military and economic partnerships with Venezuela. It was evident that an approach to the United States and the European Union might not be as advantageous as establishing relations with China and Russia, which typically do not concern themselves with electoral matters. It is understandable that the importance attributed to Venezuela by these countries also has geopolitical motivations. In this scenario, Maduro initiated a new offensive against some opponents, prompting the European Union to question his ability to oversee the upcoming electoral process. An important development was the appointment of Elvis Amoroso, the current Comptroller General of the Republic and known as the disqualifier due to his history of disqualifying candidates. He was appointed by Maduro to oversee the upcoming electoral process. Remember that in the last elections, Maduro won by a significant margin, garnering 67% of the votes against only 20% for Enrique Capriles, the main opposition leader at that time. Maduro's victory was not solely due to his popularity but also due to the opposition's boycott, which discredited the electoral process. At this moment, Maduro seems to be adopting similar strategies, with the appointment of Bolivarian figures to oversee the electoral process and possibly undermine its credibility. With the elections approaching, it's likely that Maduro will seek re-election or support a successor in his presidential position. Another piece of news, folks, is about Argentina. Sergio Massa, the current Minister of Economy of Argentina, has unveiled a bold plan to control inflation in the country. It's important to highlight that inflation is the primary factor associated with declining popularity, as people are primarily concerned with employment and their purchasing power. Ideological matters, whether progressive or conservative, end up taking a back seat in the face of these more immediate concerns. It's worth emphasizing that it's essential to respect the reality of each individual. Financial condition and employment have a direct impact on day-to-day perceptions. In this regard, Massa's plan aims to control inflation and improve the country's economic situation to keep the left in power. However, these measures don't entail structural changes in the Argentine economy due to the limited available short-term timeframe. Massa, one of the presidential candidates in Argentina, is in a challenging position in the electoral polls, with candidates of a more conservative orientation, Javier Ley and Patricia Burriti, amassing over 65% of the voting intentions. On the other hand, Massa, representing the left, holds a smaller percentage. Therefore, this plan is a strategic move to boost his popularity and election prospects. The plan includes conjunctural measures focused on enhancing government popularity. For example, subsidized financing lines by the government are planned, totaling 400 billion pesos allocated to individuals and self-employed individuals. Additionally, there's an intention to reduce taxes, despite the difficulties related to obligations with the IMF. Massa himself criticizes the IMF's demand for public spending cuts, arguing that this would limit economic recovery and job creation. Other factors complicate the economic situation, such as the climate crisis affecting Argentina, with the worst drought in decades. This has had a negative impact on production, leading to significant GDP losses and devaluation of the Argentine peso. To mitigate these effects, the plan outlines subsidies for exports, with a focus on strengthening sectors like wines, meats, and wheat. Although not a perfect solution, as it doesn't address structural issues and productivity, Massa's plan is a short-term conjunctural measure to tackle the crisis and boost his popularity. Furthermore, indirect cooperation with Brazil and other South American nations is relevant, particularly considering the interests of the BRICS. The potential rise of the right in Argentina also affects the regional dynamics, including the plans of the Brazilian government. Another piece of news concerns Japan. Japan has recently announced a bold plan regarding its national security. We are referring to a Japan that is geographically surrounded, both physically and geopolitically. For instance, there are disputes with Russia, including over the Kuril Islands. Furthermore, Japan is in proximity to China, engaged in disputes over other islands, and consistently faces threats from North Korea, including nuclear tests and the launch of intercontinental ballistic missiles that pass over Hokkaido. Consequently, Japan finds itself in a turbulent scenario. Additionally, Japan is close to the South China Sea region, where tensions have significantly escalated among countries such as the Philippines, Vietnam, China, and Taiwan. Geographically, Japan plays a crucial role and is encircled by geopolitical adversaries. Kishida has been striving to emphasize the strengthening of the Japanese military. It is important to recall that after World War II, due to Japan's actions during the war, the country adopted a more pacifist stance in its constitution, with limitations on military investments, mainly focusing on defense. However, this approach is being reformulated under Kishida's leadership to include more substantial investments in defense capabilities and, to some extent, even offensive capabilities. Japan is now displaying greater audacity and is even being regarded by the Chinese as a factor of Asian hawk in relation to potential military expansionism. Japan is a strategic nation, and its plans encompass significant expenditures, projecting around 7 trillion yen in 2024 alone, equivalent to approximately $60 billion. Moreover, the country is seeking to attract several strategic companies that were previously situated in the Far East and Southeast Asia to now produce in Japan, thereby meeting its own needs. This includes companies like the British BAE Systems, which will relocate from Malaysia to manufacture in Japan, Lockheed Martin from the United States, which will shift its operations from Singapore to Japan, as well as the collaboration between the French company Thales and Mitsubishi for mine detector production. The American company L3Harris, which established a subsidiary in Japan to cater to Japanese military technological demands, also stands out. All of this is part of Japan's endeavor to bolster its military capabilities and its position in the region. In the current global context marked by tensions in Taiwan, the South China Sea, and other parts of the world, Japan is reconsidering its pacifist stance and is arming itself more substantively. The situation is intricate and dynamic, and Japan is striving to adapt to ongoing geopolitical changes. Another piece of news concerns the significant statements made by the President of the European Council, Charles Michel. He announced that in the upcoming meeting, scheduled for October in Grenada, the European Union will discuss the admission of new members. At this time, Spain holds the presidency of the European Union. The entry of potential new members will be debated, such as Moldova, Albania, Ukraine, Montenegro, Bosnia, and the contentious issue of Turkey. A relevant question is whether Turkey will indeed join the organization, given that President Erdogan has expressed support for Sweden's entry in exchange for progress in its accession. However, Turkey has historically faced challenges regarding its accession due to concerns about democracy and human rights. Additionally, Turkey's entry would bring a substantial number of Turkish parliamentarians to the European Parliament, raising questions about representation and the possible influence of Islam. While expansion is a way to strengthen the European Union, careful consideration of new members is necessary. Some of these countries, like Ukraine, may have economic and governance challenges that could affect the bloc's stability. The entry of new members could also heighten nationalism in existing European Union countries. The UK's exit has already triggered a sense of detachment in some smaller member states, questioning the relevance of decisions made by a European Parliament in which they lack a strong voice. President Macron has also voiced concern about the growing influence of the BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, challenging the old Western geopolitical order. This BRICS expansion could lead to a fragmentation of the world and a shift of power towards the East. Tensions between the European Union and countries like France and the BRICS have also manifested in trade relations. The European Union is seeking to impose tariffs on Brazilian and Argentine products, citing concerns about indigenous peoples and environmental issues. In response, Brazil is proposing reciprocal measures, such as imposing tariffs on European products or opening markets for Brazilian goods. Hence, the expansion of the European Union and the geopolitical dynamics at play carry profound implications. The admission of new members can strengthen the bloc, but it requires careful assessment to prevent economic and political imbalances. Furthermore, tensions with the BRICS and changes in the international geopolitical order necessitate a cautious positioning of the European Union to maintain its influence and stability. To conclude, folks, there has been good news from the Ukrainians. At least that's what the Ministry of Defense itself claims. As we already know, the counteroffensive has proven to be considerably slower than initially thought. This observation has been confirmed by Ukrainian generals, Western media, and the United States. In short, despite this, they managed to advance through the first line of defense. This slowness is largely tied to the time they granted the Russians to prepare. To illustrate, time was given for the construction of trenches, installation of minefields, and increased production of weaponry to withstand the Ukrainian counteroffensive. Furthermore, the predictability of the attack also facilitated the Russians' preparation. However, the advancement follows a more predictable trajectory, something everyone expected. They gave Russia about 6 months to prepare, and now the Ukrainians have achieved an initial breakthrough. They managed to breach the first line of defense, specifically in the city of Robotyne. This city holds strategic value, as it's a key point for reaching Top Park, a logistical center located 20 to 30 kilometers from the positions the Ukrainians have captured. Controlling Top Park is significant, as it's where the distribution of military equipment and weaponry takes place. The question that arises is whether the first line of defense, typically consisting of 3 lines, with the first being the most resistant, has already been overcome by the Ukrainians. This could result in more significant losses for the attacker, i.e., the Ukrainians. Is Russia preparing even stronger lines of defense? There's uncertainty about whether this initial advance is truly noteworthy. These doubts linger. In any case, this brings renewed morale to the Ukrainian army, which had been facing a series of bad news. Now, we'll see what the upcoming events hold and to what extent the Ukrainians will be able to advance. If you liked it, subscribe to the channel and give it a like. Thank you and see you next time.